Europa, but physical, but digital. Where to review? So, Europa Universalis, strategy game, which exists. It's been played. It and its various cousins and descendants have been played on the channel. Europa itself began as a physical cardboard and paper and printed words game, of which I was able to acquire a physical copy some time ago, and sometime later, because numbers have gone up. That one, well, the ones that way I don't have this set up so that my mouse will actually go that far from this zone. This is the designated mouse having zone at the moment. Since those numbers are numbers, I've decided to take the physical copy of the game that I had and attempt to kind of pretty it up a bit digitally, and then assemble the relevant resources to make it feasible to then play it via some manner of virtual board game medium. Probably not table sim itself, maybe table sim. And perhaps even, should the stars align, convince 5 other people to play through some portion of a Euro campaign. But first, there is much retouching to do. Europa has many parts to be operated upon. And so in a previous session I started to do some tracing out of the lines of the maps, and there's certainly much more of that to do, but I decided for a change of pace, for a second session of this, to instead start taking a look at pictures of cardboard squares, as there are many squares in need of approach. So let's get in even closer there. Of those perhaps unfamiliar with Strata board game, it is common conceit to have counters. Little helpful cardboard blocks of various levels of detail that contain valuable information. One of those cases where games where there was technology that was developed for more direct practical applications that then made its way into games and was gamified, where in particular if we go to a more military, I suppose I could go ahead and dig up an image for display. Where counters were developed kind of in parallel evolution across various militaries, have a standardized notation for diagramming out what shape an army is and what's in it, and so forth. And so when people decided to make game about those armies, what kind of token do we use to represent some folks on the board? Why not use the pictures? Use the symbols that already exist. As they're furthermore, there's let me go find a good war game counter. Surely have one kicking about somewhere. A lot of data contained therein. Wait, yeah, that's the way to do it. Bear with a moment as I do things that are not progressing the thing that I'm nominally here for on the side for purposes of generating a helpful visual aid for a conversation tangent that's the introduction to what's going on. Grab myself an image. Alright, just quickly throw Grigsby.jpg into the layout there. So this is a screenshot from War in the West, a large, meaty, toothy strata game that may have been recently released on Steam and wound up in my library, and be waiting to get broadcasted at some point, because that's a thing I said I'd do for the numbers as accumulates over there. And I've done once and will do again. So all these little squares here that you will see all over the place, these squares with glyphs and numbers and X's and so forth on them. All of these hieroglyphs mean things, and that's what counters are. They have all this data that once you know the vocabulary, you can look at something and be like, yeah, that's an armored division over there, and, well, that's it's a core, I think, 1X off the top. But, like, there's some tanks, there's some infantry, there's some paratroopers, and some other things laying underneath them. There's, let's see, what's some of the other things floating around near this front, or maybe near the back. I think that's engineer there. That's supposed to like indicate a shovel. HQs, obviously, but yeah. So there's all this symbology that gets used for technical purposes to describe military things, and so board games took up that as a useful conceit for putting variety of things and information on a board in a way that's relatively inexpensive to print out and put to use. And Europa Zero has counters. The ones on this page aren't particularly elaborate. Here's an army token, a navy token, various progress trackers that exist, the current stability of Russia, current land tech of Russia, naval tech of Russia. Colony markers, each of which has a name on it for convenience of tracking. Spanish ones are over here. Another nice bright yellow slice. Down here, the armies of various minor nations. Sweden, false. The Holy Roman Empire as a composite entity. Hungary, Poland. 2 Prussians. And an implied 3rd Prussian that's out there somewhere. Khanate of Crimea. What turn it is, what round it is. There's many, many, many squares, some of which look pretty alright, others of which have kind of suffered from how they were put to paper and are in need of a cleanup. Like, look, here's the Swiss army. There it is. That iconic gray and mud Swiss flag. There's gonna be a lot of beautifying. Hopefully. I'm not good at pixel art. I may ultimately end up, like, tapping into the old friendosphere, looking for other folks to consult about how to clean things up. As far as visual icons. Since it's also a lot of very nice distinctive visual, like you can see that the Russian armies here have the old double bird. Whereas, let's see, are there Spanish armies on this page, or is it just the very large number of Spanish colonies? Making my way, like, Turkish armies there have the moon and star. There we go, here's Spanish arms with that, if you squint, if you, like, detach your retinas, that might look like the Spanish coat of arms. That may have once been an icon, like, okay, then maybe there's like a lion there and a lion there and some kind of vortex, the Spanish void hole. The various crowns and nodules and blooms of Spain. The Hispania Mass. Cleaner versions of all of these mostly well-chosen, vibrant icons need to end up on these squares. And so forth. So in pursuit of that, I'm actually going to not be working directly on these sheets, because you can also notice, more so if I zoom out, that these scans are a little bit askew. They're not quite dead on. This was primarily, I scanned these to have all the information on them organized. While this sheet isn't particularly elaborate, there's other ones for, like, generals and stuff, where there's a bunch of numbers on them that needed storage and sorting. So instead of working directly on those, I'm gonna go ahead and, well, I've actually... remnants of the last time I started thinking about doing this do exist throughout my files. And so I have like all these raw sheets that I scanned of all of the counters. You also have individual ones, or at least one of each type, separated out into individual images I can work on. So for example, you can see that little thumbnail there, I have that viewer set up to just remind of what the basics are, just viewing these other files I have saved. Hey, it's the Gold Fleet. Hey, it's the Far East Spice Fleet. It's the Smyrna Trade Convoy, which is a thing. Here's a featureless French admiral. Can you tell he boats? And so forth. So I have those all isolated on their own, and I'll take up individual ones of those and think about how I want to clean them up, make them serve better as... whoop, that's a different file. Well, that's... so for importing it into Tabletop Simulator, as that's a consideration, a thing to maybe try to do, there's like a template that you use to make them into a deck of cards entity. That's what those are for there. Counting of many bits. Oh, yeah, let's see, I'm gonna grab individual item, starting with this diplomacy counter, I suppose. So also, hold on, so what happens if I... well, okay, wait. Better way to do this. Let me create a new canvas of some vaguely appropriate size. Let's go for like a 256 square, I guess. That's probably enough pixel to work with for a board game pog. I don't need ultra... I don't need 4K textures on my Spanish Army counters, or do I? Do I want that ultra high definition picture of the concept of 40,000 heavily armed Turks? Maybe I do. Maybe I don't. Who knows? So, let me just see about... take this, kill it, then redirect you over it. There we go. Ish. And a moment to adjust. There, that's about right. Take one of these, and then let's import into here. Go ahead and drag in. Alright, so there's my kind of scrubbed off diplomacy pog. Let me see, now that that's kind of kicked in, I'm going to ease the volume back a little bit. Just midge, just a notch. Our backing for the moment is the Europa 3 soundtrack. This was the first generation where they started to have like their own in-house composer do stuff. Where before that they kind of sourced historic musics. Big in this. Get it properly filling the space for the moment. And so, core information that we have here on a diplomacy marker has been largely smudged out for purposes of this one. Actually, it's very complex, because these are two-sided. There's all kinds of data on a diplomacy counter. Go ahead and grab a picture of a complete one for looking at, but you can see kind of vaguely where I've smudged out the specific numbers that were on the one I captured. So it's like a name of whose this is, and then a whole bunch of data in all the corners that is relevant for how the mechanics do things. Plumbing. Gonna lock that in there as a foundation to use, and then I kind of want to diagram out how I'm gonna use this space. That's another thing that is kind of underpresent on the counters as they exist. I'd certainly want to add in and put to better use is there's not a lot of structure on the surface of the counters to help like draw your eye and direct your attention. So if I went as far as to reprint these especially, I'd want to be sure there's like guiding lines to quickly snap your eyes to where the important bits are. Or probably if I were to do a physical printing of this stuff, I'd leave the numbers off the counters and instead have them on a chart. Much easier to consult the chart in one place than to have to squint at the corner of every pog in a lot of circumstances. If you're going so far as to play Boardgame Europa, but yes, it's like a... Hold on. Quickly sketch onto the corners there. Helpful boxes. So they, well, you know, let's zoom in a little further. Enhance! Really experience this sheet of paper and pen. Those diplomacy markers. So, like, on one side of this, there's numbers that are like the cost of moving the counter up the track for each step. In terms of like diplomacy effort points that occur when you do a diplo. When you plume, how much so? Hold on here. Selection tool, you get out of there, you're in my way. Clear this off. There's like the top 64 of that, so it's like a quarter of the pog. Sliced out there. Eighth, rather. Yeah, eighth. Quarter eighth. Some fraction. Yeah, quarter. Quarter, which then when you flip it out into the 2 dimensions, that's a 16th of the pog. Up there. For the moment, probably better to maybe go up 4/3. Get that whole 9 bits proportioned out. Depends on whether I want to keep things tiny or get more extensive. My midline. And over here, if I just want to with quarters for the moment. Here's my line. Come on. You have one job here. Draw line on layer. Why? What are you doing? Open software. Why do you gotta make everything so? Okay. I think I isolated the problem. In a different sub-window, a different sub-window had detected like one tick of the mouse wheel and interpreted that as meaning, oh, you want to switch out the square head of the virtual pen for no head. You want to just draw nothing, right? You want the void pen, the absence of pen. Beauty of it, it doesn't draw anything. Alright, so there we go. That's putting aside like a 16th on each quarter, and then considering like the edges would probably be void space, and then put an art here and a name there. Or put a name up here and an art spanning all of this. Name here, art middle, number in each corner. Something along that line. Again, this is the sort of thing where at some point I will proceed to consult with associates of mine who know actual things about design, visual proportions, and what have you, as there is a science to this. We in abstract have some understanding of, yeah, like you, have some understanding of how shape good for eye. Alright, hold on a moment. I'm gonna go grab a diplomacy counter out of the box. out of my vast assortment of cubes to have a reminder of how one looks when it's filled out. Over there, yeah, here we go. Algeria, congratulations, you have been volunteered to set the standard for what diplomacy pogs should be. Where, to note also alongside this, they're slightly color-coded regionally, a little bit. Where, for example, the one I sampled this, you know, blank off of is, you know, kind of your off-white beige. Whereas the Algeria pog that I just grabbed is a pleasant light green. So let's see, to go looking at that additional data that is present on the pog. So on one, I might even try to look for a way to simplify this down so that you only need one side of the pog to do all the maneuvers. Because like how this works, then just I'll give myself another layer to sketch on here for vague gesticulating. So how it works is you got like name across here. So like yeah, Algeria is right. Well, Al Jazeera is how it's referred to on that. And then so on the one side there's a series of escalating numbers in each corner. So like for the Algeria one there's like 2, 3, 15, 10, and those are like the diplomacy costs for moving it up the track in those corners. Then in the middle, like over around here-ish, there's a tiny pink 15 that I think is like how much cash they're willing to pay out if you convince them to do a bargain, or how much like financial aid they will need if they are under stress. It's like a tiny 15 here, and then over on this side there is a little moon and star to note that yes, Islam, and furthermore, especially, like there's a little additional bonus modifier that the Turks get for trying to diplome here. So there's a little moon 2+1 is how it is phrased there on that side of the token. And that's one facing of it. On the other side, then, just to quickly, you know, well, give me a real big eraser for all my describing purposes. Yeah, there we go. There's the industrial strength stuff. So then on the other side, whoop, hold on. Why do you have a universal brush size for all tools? Come on, you should know that I'm not going to need nearly as much brush. Alright, so then on the other side, there's still... name is still roughly here, Algeria, written there again. Then, on that side, you have further numbers in corners. You got like a 1, a 6, and a -40. Dial these numbers. 1, 6, -40. I'd have to go into the rule book to consult what those mean at this point, because we're getting a little bit off track. And then up in the corner of the front side, you have, once again, the moon, to remind that Islam here, and it's moon to +1 is mentioned again, but the moon is up here and the 2+1 is down in the middle under the Algeria. So we have this cloned information, except on one side it's been split up into 2 disjointed blocks, whereas on the other side it's condensed down to over here. And It's like this half of it, the reminder of what the rule means in the context of diplomacy, that you could just know as a player of the game and only need the moon icon there to remind. Because then, like, of course, elsewhere on other diplomacy pogs, there's like cross, more different cross. Further, there's the three flavors across: your East, your West, and your Protestant, Catholic, Orthodox, and miscellaneous. And then there's some further symbols additionally for the rest of the world religions. I forget which one they use for that, but there's some choice there. But yeah, so like right away, that's something that can further be although there are other minors that have more specific contextual bonuses to diplomacy. Like there are some places that are just, they especially like Austria or Spain or France, and buddy up with them additionally as far as their thing. So in those cases, that might be more relevant. That would require further review before settling into a more proper tool. But so anyway, we have, and there is, let's see, just a review on this face. There is no small pink number, so that is completely absent from the pog on the front face. I think this one is the front face with the 3 numbers rather than the 4 numbers. Let me go ahead and pry open the rules. Or wait, also. So as other people have tried to make more sense of this game and put it into more sensible contexts, there exists among the files out there in the world and in my possession. Let me see, just make a couple of file system navigation noises. There's a nice clean little PDF that has been made of Europa's rules, like, rearranged to, like, be more reasonably sorted out with respect to the order you invoke them in when you play. And finishing being translated into English. Legalistic board game English, but that's a feature in this case, since you're looking at the laws of a board game and trying to determine what you do. So that's all well and good, and that can be found out there in the wild. If I were to put together any sort of digital distribution of these, I would go ahead and include this and take whatever means necessary to credit its author in the process, since this is a fine piece of work that makes it much more convenient to try to understand what this game even does. Alright, so indeed, this face I'm looking at here, this is the front. And what we have out of that is, that's the religion, you know, the name, contextual political bonus is written in down here. So your moon to +1, or the example that they have for their diagram is Hanover gets a +1 bonus to England if it is after 1700. And so then we have, in the corners here, this number off here that's hiding behind my thumbnail at the moment. That is dowry. That is how much it costs to get a royal marriage with them. The little additional fee that you pay as you move to that level of diplomacy. Down here is the subsidy number. That is how much you will need to spend on them if they are in need of a bailout. And over here is the additional diplomacy cost of entering military alliance. So then the 4 numbers on the corners on the back are the delta values for diplomating into the other states along the spectrum. Your expeditionary corps, your eventual vassalization, and so forth. That's all those, the further numbers on the back, where in the case of Algeria, those are, yeah, 2 additional points to get them to expeditionary corps, 3 points for entry into war, 15 points, or let's see, yeah, 10 points to vassalize, 15 points to annex. Where also to note, as I haven't redrawn these yet on this side, but so that proceeds in a clockwise circle around the pog, the costs, in order 1, 2, 3, 4, rather than keeping it, yeah, spiral inward. And then the tiny pink mystery number down there. Sweep this clean. The pink mystery number is the fidelity rating on them, which is something to do with the difficulty of doing, like, counter-diplomacy against them? Something like that. Let's see. Diplomacy on minor countries. Counter... diplomatic actions... What is fidelity rating? Start the document. Show me fidelity. What does it do? Fidelity is how resistant they are to, like, internal diplomatic friction. During, like, random events that can cause upheaval within a country, a higher fidelity one is less prone to abandoning its existing agreements and treaties on its own. So that is a number that exists to be invoked once, anywhere else in the game, as part of a random event. A common, like, broad class of random event. But still, it's these numbers taking up plenty of space. Getting to know the Roll20 API is one of the more approachable ways I'm thinking of doing this. That is a reasonably powerful system to work with. And, you know, already is board game infrastructure, and I may have already imported a bunch of assets to Roll20. May have, I know I did, during the way back years ago previous attempt to maybe organize a group to try to Europe. Alright, so, let's see, to review requirements for Diplomacy POG as it stands. So we have 5 numbers that govern, like, the core thing you do with the Diplomacy POG, dragging it back and forth along the chart, which I don't think need to be on the POG. It's a choice that was made 20 years ago, 25 years ago, when this was printed. Yeah, we just need really big POGs. Give me the Giga map that takes up your entire property. You need to own land in order to play this game properly. A board game to span an acre. But yeah, so the progress numbers are better off kept in a chart than on the POGs. So that narrows down quite a bit of the data that lives on this little cardboard square. Also, conveniently, I already created said charts. I have them sitting in a Google spreadsheet, waiting to be extracted and sorted and redistributed to whatever medium I need there. That's all well and good. But yeah, so for information that actually is half convenient to have sitting on the diplomacy marker for a reminder, yeah, name, of whose pog this is. Have a corner for religion icon. You know, your moon, your cross, your what have you. The individual situational modifiers, those might be perfectly good. Or let's see, fidelity rating. Question of how much or how little data do I want to keep on the pog? From the passes I made of trying to put this into Tabletop Simulator, it indeed doesn't like having a big and intricate enough texture on a board to quite convey most of the information. A lot of data gets lost in blending and blurring. Something like name, religion icon, and then maybe, supposing for the spirit of things that I did want to keep some or much data on the on the card. Another consideration would be that I could like quarter up the bottom edge and have the spectrum of main numbers down here. Although I have 5 numbers, up to 5 numbers on that spectrum rather than 4, so I need to do something additional with that. I have a total of 8 numbers. I have 8 numbers and a short block of text that are part of the POG in its base form to rearrange. Well, that's a lot of cells. There's 8 cells, and yeah, a 9th cell and a name. So if I just put art in the middle for, you know, your little parchment and quill to be like, yep, this is a diplomacy pog. Or maybe even swap out that for, like, you know, bird icon. Could be what you'd put in here. If either of scroll with pen, or perhaps friendly diplomacy bird. That's not turning out bird shape particularly. Let's see, let me just... Yeah, sure, bird. For the moment, just to placehold the idea. To note, just to scribble. These are the spitball notes to just eventually pass off to one of the actual artists and have them, you know, prepare the pie off camera, and then I dramatically unveil, ah, look at this thing. Look at Diplomacy Bird. Would you like to sign an alliance with Bird? Seal your oath before this bird. There he be. Diplomacy Pog, please sign here. This would at least give me space to put all the original data onto one side, even if the result then becomes kinda cluttered. I could work with this though, especially if I like do a bit of color coding or something to help, you know, properly highlight each of these and make them behave as they should. But like, let's see, so 5 of these need to be the main progression line of the diplomatic statuses, all the effort costs of doing negotiation. You just kind of spitball and take example here. I suppose now there's also a bunch of these lines that exist on not the original grid layer. That's fine. We collapse together as needed. Let's see, to take... Also, like the original only in corners design means that there's one number from the main spectrum that's on one side of the POG, where the other 4 are all on the opposite side. So that's something that gets smoothed out if you consolidate everything onto the same face. You know what, yeah, there's 5 up here that you could, you know, first one is up here in the top corner, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, well, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's your diplomacy numbers. So like in the case of Al down here, my sample POG. 1, 2, 3, 10, 15. Or if those were then, you know, typed in font and maybe given a little bit of like highlight. Perhaps devise an icon to represent each step of the diplomacy line, so that then you can have the little reminder symbol either next to or underneath each number. Or if you had like, so let me erase that for a moment. But so like this first one up here, step 1 of the diplomacy process is royal marriage. So if we had like a 1 under a little crown, be like, yep, that's a wedding. And then for the other ones, like, but yeah, then so devise icons to put under these so that there's immediately, when you look at it, direct reminder of what this number means. Whether like a symbol on top of it, or there's a like flat color symbol and then the number is written on top of the symbol. So you have 1 of crown, so 1, you know, point of effort to get a marriage. And so yeah, these are the rest of the way around. This is expedition. CE status, Corps Expeditionnaire. Or wait, no, that first number, that's military alliance, and wedding number is elsewhere. Wedding numbers might have flat cost. Right, so that's alliance. Up there. Dowry is elsewhere. Dowry can have the little crown icon instead. I'll just put their word forms on for now. That's military alliance number. Defensive alliance, Expedition Corps. active entry into fighting. Vassalize. Then over here, annex. And not everyone has an annex number. Some places cannot be diplo-annexed. That's the edge of the pog. Alright, let me move. For labeling purposes. So there's your annex number, which then leaves down here in the corners remaining 4 numbers to consider are dowry, subsidy, fidelity, and situational bonus. Where having never gotten a chance to put the game in motion, it remains unclear what order of importance these are, how often they are referenced. Then I would probably want to put whichever ones will be most often referenced onto the remaining corners, and then the less important ones into the 2 middle slots. Those then to, not dowry on a corner then. Fidelity and situational. Yeah, the context clue, because those are the ones that stand out on their own. Because like context clue, like the situational penalty or bonus, plus situational bonus will be consulted potentially every time diplomacy happens, because you want to be reminded as to whether you have that plus or not. And fidelity will be consulted whenever there is a local shakeup, as happens. 15 for fidelity. Call this like con abbreviation. Well, let's call this blob of pixels just slathered on there, since I'm mouse writing these rather than typing. Situational bonus, fidelity, and then that leaves the remaining numbers where subsidy over here. That's another thing, is that subsidy is always phrased and presented as a negative value. It is foremost cost. So right away, the fact that it's a negative number where everything else on the card isn't, that on its own lends a bit of highlighting to, yeah, it's the one anti-number that is present on the sheet. So having it where that serves also as kind of a visual dividing line between it and the other number, that is certainly a vague direction where, again, I have no actual training in the arts of organizing visual information to put things forward. So if you, current or future viewer, are versed in such arts, and these efforts are causing you much confusion, frustration, or the joy resulting indirectly from the vicarious experience of either of those, feel free to offer suggestions as to how to arrange bird icon. Negotiate with bird. This is an open process. Highlight on that bird. Give them... Diplomacy is a very serious issue. Diplomacy bird is a serious animal. He's waiting to hear what you have to say. What, do you have a better idea? Do you have an alternative treaty? If you have a suggestion, write it down, tie it to Diplomacy Bird, and send him on his way. Diplomacy Bird is not rude. It's not forceful. It's flexible. It's waiting to negotiate. Diplomacy Bird is a symbol of peace. Eventually. Ability, subsidy, additional bonus, dowry goes here. This square, the Dow. Sample pog of owl, just to have sample numbers on this sketch. That's a 6 for Algeria. That is, how much information is on a diplomacy counter, rearranged to all be on one side of the diplomacy counter, and... If I then, like, drop back to 100% size, which I suppose is also still quite large, since this is doing it as many pixels. Let's drop that to half size. If each of these were a number on a glyph, this could be readable. Very busy, but still legible. Still probably work out to being preferable, just keeping most of these numbers on a page rather than on a square, but not impossible to keep the numbers on the square if that were the goal. There's much data in the life of Diplomacy Bird. And let's go ahead and store this somewhere. In a moment, where was I keeping all of these? Create. Folder for counter sketches. And there we go. This is now stored for reference. Initial considerations of how to diplomacy counter. Which is also, this is one of the more complicated tokens that exists. Most of the other ones don't have this much data. They don't have so much data that they're using every corner of every side and then some, cramming into all the margins. The diplomacy tokens is probably the most dense object that's sitting in the token bin. Where, let's see, just to quickly brush through and move along here. Yeah, like a bunch of these other like common ones, those are going to be much easier to sort out. The point where the actual design for many of them is just fine, and it would just be a matter of resampling and getting cleaner art to serve the purpose. Where let's go ahead and make another new canvas for a new effort. And alright, yeah, that's Europa 3. Hop over to Euro 4. As far as sources of noise. Might consider migrating my efforts out of GIMP and into some other image editor. The way GIMP is structured makes it very inconvenient to capture these and move from one to another. Alright, that time I managed it. For now. But okay, fresh canvas. Go ahead and import different foundational thing to work with. We have here a British admiral, well, English admiral. English and then later British, as Britain is invented at some point in the campaign. There we go. So there's not a crazy amount of data that needs to be stored on one of these. We'll go ahead and fetch one out of the bin for reference again as to how it looks. Vanilla status when completed. Latches on this case. Who is our volunteer? I'm gonna get one of each. After a point, so like all of the military commander pogs are fundamentally the same shape, but on some of them there is additional data. There's at least always one side's worth of data, which is important since the physical pogs for these, they actually use the other side to store a different general entirely. Be sure that they can fit as many generals as possible onto the one, or small number, of physical sheets of pogs. Save on that extra cardboard. So, core data that exists on one of these, as I now have for reference Admiral Herbert here. Give myself a layer, lock down the base image, and get to quickly sketching out here. We got a name that goes up in the middle spot here, and if you squint a little more, you can see where I smudged out the vanilla information on this one as well. It's a bit less obvious with the red on red. There are some areas you can see that are a bit flatter than the surrounding texture of the scan. So yes, we have name on Pog. It's there. It's on here. Your name. There's art occupying the center that indicates what kind of leader it is. So in this case, this is an ordinary admiral. There's different art for generals, where it's a fellow on a horse. I can actually demonstrate leafing forward here through the. There's a conquistador. You squint at it, you can maybe see like a little conquistador hat sort of idea, like a fellow with a helmet, I think is what that's supposed to be. Maybe. It's very rough. That's conquistador. There's an explorer, where you have a couple of boats and a sextant. Navigational tool for measuring angles and what have you. There's a full fleet. There's a general. You have a little fellow on it. You have that picture of Napoleon. Napoleon having trouble controlling his horse. That's your icon for generals. Man, horse, presumed army somewhere within shouting distance of man on horse. Those different core arts representing what kind of leader this is. Then you have the data, where, so for all of these, part of how generals work in the board game is you have a crop of historical leaders that will show up on some turn, and unless killed in combat, then leave on some later turn. So you have, for that, a number on the left of turn when they debut, and number on the right of turn where they leave, where they retire, where they are dead. Where, for example, then, so just to pencil in sample data, Herb, a good boy, Admiral Herbert, he shows up on turn 40. Let me zoom in just to all of the space, get closer, enhance the Herb. Herb shows up on turn 40, and leaves on turn 44, having completed all work that he needed to do in service of the Queen. Queen, King, whichever monarch is reigning, from turns 40 to 44 of history, as you may recall. So then, further data that exists on this, down here underneath the portrait are the three main numbers that are the general's skills. Where in the case of our sample man here, Herb is a 2, 2, 3. And I'll go ahead and check up in the old rule book. Well, after the fact, the restoration, the enhanced rules, the completed rules. Yes, so for a military leader, these are presented maneuver, fire, and shock. And then in the case of generals, there's additionally a siege value crudely penciled in over here, like very blatantly kludged into the corner. It's not on the main line, it's in pink even over here, just the secondary printing of right, 4th stat for landmen. We need to include that here. They have their like sketch a boot. Yes, yeah. For walking on water. How nimble are you? Where also, as ends up in the later computer games, these are on a scale of 1 to 6, or 0 to 6 in some cases. I think there are 0 stat generals somewhere in the board game for a couple of purposes. So yeah, you have your maneuver, your fire, your shock. And a gun? Yeah. There's core stats, and then there's siege over here if you are a general of the land. Like a little fort there. Which looks more like a hut at this point. Maybe if I had like a proper like third crenellation here. The teeth on the edge of a tower. Siege goes there. On the vanilla general as they stand. Oh, and also siege is phrased as a negative number on the stats. Siege is an anti-number. I'd like to take up an example for elsewhere. I have drawn as a sample general Royal Marines as an abstract entity. the Royal Marines as they exist from turn 43 to turn 45, so a contemporary with the later years of Herb. They, for example, have 3 points of siege, or -3 points of siege, 3 anti-siege, reverse siege. Act on over there for the side for a land leader. In this corner over here, there's a concept of rank that exists. It's like in the board game, there's a further sub-mechanic where all of your generals have like a priority order that they take. Herb, appropriately class H on this scale. And so it's a limitation to how you have to apply your generals, that your largest formation on the board needs to have your highest ranked general in it, and so on down the line. And for example, if you make your monarch into a general, they are always considered highest rank. So that's like a risk you take when you make your leader take the field as a commander, that they need to put themselves up at the front because they are the king. They're not going to command any less than the best of the troops, and they're going to put themselves at risk as a result. And if they turn out to be a terrible, idiot, trash general, then you've shot yourself in the foot, as now your best army is in the hands of a moron. Until such time as you get your king murdered. And so forth. And of course various countries will have, like, fans that they go through of having a very powerful and politically connected general who's not actually good at fighting, but he's important, so he has to stay at the front until he gets shot. Dynamics. Mechanics. That historic flavor. Or then, alright, so furthermore though, because there is in fact even more data than, if we stop here, this is a pretty clean pog still, pretty fair counter. There's data here, but it stands up as far as, you know, each direction has a thing that it's doing. But if I just scroll over here, you can see there's an additional icon on Conquistador and Explorer. So that is there to, like, indicate that they're allowed to go out onto the rest of the world map and have adventures. So there's your mystery circle there. Or high seas adventuring, that indicates that. And then, furthermore, there's a couple of additional symbols that kludge their way into the space immediately around these that indicate a variety of things. Like, let's see. As I go forward to consult the rules, so there's a couple of different symbols that will put themselves over here or over here as needed. Alright, so yeah, a blue star indicates that they are authorized to leave the European map. That's your global adventures on the high seas icon. An M in that position, like a little lowercase m, indicates a naval leader that cannot leave the Mediterranean or Black Sea or other coastal provinces, or the coastal provinces immediately adjacent to those, where it's a further thing, I believe, that admirals, or at least some of them, are allowed to go ashore and command armies on the coast in the board game, which is interesting as far as, like, flexibility, that you can then have your boatman do a shore raid on his own, just give him a fleet and an army and have him go to town. However, some are inland seas only commanders. They are very, even more so, scared of the open water. Beyond cannot leave Europe, cannot leave the innermost circle of Europe, cannot leave the wading pool at the heart of the world, as far as the board of the game is concerned. And there's a few more regional limitations that can kludge their way into this position, where that spot over there that's under the thumbnail, it's mostly used for regional limitations. Where, let's see, an @ symbol indicates that the leader may only serve in Asia, where what Asia is strictly defined elsewhere in the rules. A $sign indicates the leader may only serve in America. A white... Alright, okay, so getting over into the other symbol that occurs over here. In this spot, you get a copyright symbol, which is either white or yellow, where a white copyright symbol indicates a privateer rather than an admiral, who thus cannot command full-size fleets, only small detachments of boat, and has the ability to use those boats to do piracy in addition to the normal uses of boats. A yellow copyright symbol indicates that they are both a privateer and an admiral, and may do pirate adventures and command fleets normally. Whereas an example that I pulled out here just to look over the pogs and see reminders of these things, I have an explorer, a Mr. Grenville, who does exploring for Britain from turn 20 to turn 23. He is authorized for high seas adventures, but is only a privateer. He has that, so also more of the bad color choices that exist here. I really have to squint at this pog to try and ascertain whether that's a white copyright or a very faded yellow copyright. It's hard to tell, where like you can look at the sample thumbnail there of an explorer pog. The white C is very close in tone to that sextant, which, would you call that white, or would you call that pale yellow? It's a yellowed white. It's a really poor choice of color to then have laying next to this symbol that is either white or yellow. If you have one of one and one of the other laying side by side, get probably C for Corsair, C for Crime. If you have the two laying side by side, you can tell one from the other, but if you just have one on its own in the void, it's fairly ambiguous. I've sorted all of that out when I documented all of these leaders, so I have that written down somewhere, clean and ready to go. You know, it occurs to me that I can go ahead and take this and put it over here by all you fine folk. Not quite all of them. Let's just put it in there or down here. No, let me pop this up the display order, and then there you go. It's now over there by the chat box. All of you get to sit near the thumbnail. Sample pog. Enjoy. So this is the data that we need to go on our general token. The name, where some of the names are fairly long, so they leave the entire top of the token open to record name, and then in the middle they have duration of service and behavioral limitations, the special typing. Then down at the bottom they have stats, and the core layout of that is pretty acceptable. This also adds up to being a little busy, a little crowded, but all the data is there. It's all consistently in the same parts of the token. So mostly what I'm looking for to redo leaders is to get nicer looking portraits than this to put in the mid space. And then, nicely crisping up where all this data goes. Put reminder symbols around each of the numbers. Well, like underneath them on the stat line. So there's plenty of room for the full stat line here. In particular, even since these three stats in the middle are common to all leaders, whereas Siege only happens on land generals and only sometimes, Siege can just live in this corner and be, like, properly positioned and spaced out into the corner, where, like, on the game as printed, that is where they're not, like, even, like, in line with the rest of the stats. They're offset and kind of weirdly in their own position as an afterthought. We can take that number and just move it down here and have, like, a clean line that all the stats are sitting on for that portion of the token. We can just have the stat line starting here and going to here, and then your general ranking over there as well in the corner. We can have this evenly split out into left, right, middle, cut in thirds. That works. That can be proportioned nice and cleanly. So that's relatively straightforward, yeah. And we can even allocate a little more of the POG to whatever arts get placed here. But for that purpose, we'll need 4 of those. Or maybe slightly more, because there is also there's the Pashas, which are like generals but not. Those are your 5th flavor of general, which have a little additional data that needs to be covered. Yeah, for the most part, that can be left as is. Just straightened out, just more crisp. More pop. Go ahead and save. Bill Leader. Serve there as my sketchboard for thinking about generals. We'll move over to some other consideration. Fleet and army counters are another pretty straightforward one, where I could even just brandish the thumbnail for purposes of talking about that, where who it is. Is it fleet or is it army, like army over here, where all of the army counters have flag or coat of arms on them, and all of the fleet counters have boat on them, being a boat. Whose it is, what it is, and then a mechanic that is in place there with this this white dot here is that you have written down on a sheet of paper exactly what is inside of this army, you know, like how much damage it's taken, or if you've restocked it, or shuffled it around, or what have you. And the specifics of what's in the counter are, you know, your secret private information that you keep written down and only reveal when you actually have to do a fight with your army. There's a degree of bluffing you can do when you rearrange your armies at a given time, with the limitation of, so you have like a defined capacity of how big an army is. If the army is at less than half strength, so there's 2 sides to this counter. One, there is a plus in this circle, the other there's a minus. If the army's less than half strength, you put the minus side up. If it's more than half strength, you put the plus side up. And various mechanics cue off of full army or half army. And that's the amount of public information you have available of big English or small English. Is this a full English or a semi-English? And what have you. So for the most part, this is another token that, yep, English army, half size, here's a symbol for England. That just needs prettying up. Just recolor it, just make it bright and shiny, and have a less faded and fuzzy printing of your cross, or your eagle, or what have you. Various symbols for various empires. Just name flag what it is. This can largely stand as it is. Spread it out a little more, so that doesn't need too much of a sketchboard for consideration on it. Likewise, Colony Pog here, it has a name for specifying which one for your internal records. And you keep track, written down on number, exactly how big the colony is, and again, there's half size or full size, plus minus mechanic place for your colonies. This likewise just maybe wants a nicer sketch of a tiny colonial village. Maybe even have, like, different architectures for the colonies of the different empires. Because, like, it's the same little crayon sketch for each of them at the moment. Where you can clearly see where, like, yeah, that's a church. That certainly isn't any other manner of buildings. Like, you have any architecture and have different architectures, because this does look like kind of a very quick pencil sketch by Herb. Yeah, fleet icon, just get a clean image of boat to put there. This is a fortress. You might not be able to tell from vague, slightly pointed splotch, but this is a fort. So get a cleaner, more very obviously shaped like a star fort, and then who owns it, and yet there's a number in the middle for fort rating. Clean up that splotch to put a nice crisp number in there. And then otherwise, you know, that plainly works out. Further alteration needed. I think this splotch over here is there's like a reminder of how much a fort costs, printed on the fort token. In here. Around here, where is a fortress? Yeah, here's a... grab a level 2 Spanish fort. Yes, there's a reminder of how many cash ducat one must pay to have that much fortress printed on there. Also, further thing to... yeah, there's a lot of bad color choices in the game as printed. The number here for how big the fort is in pink. Then your pale red on this texture, this gravel, this stone gunk, this mud fortress. Picture a very pale red outline of a number and squint at it a moment to remember how big this fort is. There's general. Here is a detachment counter. There's actually no data stored on. As far as the information side of things, it stands as it is. It just is a counter. Here's some dudes. This is for small sub-army formations of land units, and it is, if you've now had enough time, you know, now that the thumbnail is serving as the main focus, I'm just going to go ahead and embiggen it. Get back to the drawing board later if I encounter something that requires some thinking about and drawing. So here's the detachment, and if you had enough time to squint at it and parse it out, you may have successfully read with your eyes that this is like a musketeer with a gun on a stand, on a monopod, braced on there. Just a fellow firing a gun on a leg. Okay, I'm brandishing my cursor at my OBS instead of at where I have this being captured. So here's my now much larger cursor since I have made the thumbnail bigger, but not bigger, just zoomed in. You have, yeah, this is the musketeer wearing, you know, little metal hat and poofy pants, and I guess he has a sword as well as a sidearm. He has a gun on a stand. Gun on a stick, common weapon of the era. Set it in there, hold it nice and steady. Fire your gun. So that is a perfectly serviceable icon for a fightman of the age. Needs a cleaner picture thereof, and again, an opportunity to have, like, a different portrait for each Empire's soldiers, where, as printed, each of these looks the same. It's just all the same fellow fighting for every cause. This one's in England. This is an English musketeer, with his distinctive, vague yellow leg splotch. That is another matter of, need to get some art to put in here. Prettier art, and then just have a smooth background to put behind it of... I may have to sit down and have a think about reassigning all the Empire colors, make sure each of them has a stark, distinctive shade of their respective tone. And then consistently apply that across all resulting art assets. Here's a boat detachment, similar idea. It's smaller than a fleet, but doesn't need the indicator for size, since it's size tiny. There are very few boats here. Again, another picture of a boat should go in this spot, cleaned up for an England. So to restate, the Grand Campaign is a 6-player experience, of which 4 of those players spend the entire campaign running the same country. England, France, Spain, and the Ottoman Empire are there at the start and there at the end. At the start of the campaign, there's a player running Portugal and a player running Venice. And partway through the campaign, they quantum leap over into a different country. The player running Portugal moves over and takes up Russia, and the player running Venice gets to switch to Netherlands or to Austria, as they so choose. Here's a pirate counter. Pirate fleets. Pirating. Special privateer fleets that can be led by pirates to do piracy. Again, they can be full size or half size, and so forth. Prime token. Grab this and slide it down a little. The top of that was off frame. Yeah, this, again, as it's a very simple pog of just, it's pirates, and how much of them is mostly a matter of get a cleaner skull and bones. Probably a much larger skull and crossbones, really make this more visually striking as the bones, the token. That'll work out pretty straightforward. Here's a colonial fortress. Or rather, right, it's a fort-like icon, but what this is it's a trading post, which are like colonies, but different. They're, like, cheaper to set up, but they're more about planting a flag in order to, let's see, resize that slightly to snap it more cleanly into place. Keep the, little edges of the drawing board visible there. So this is like a colony, but less population, more business. You can use ranks of these to get at your trade goods while having less risk of angering the natives or something like that. There's a lot of fine distinctions between trade post and full colonial settlement. everyone has a supply of both and uses them to do things. And again, it's either half size or full size, and they have a name spot for identifying the individual ones. Yeah, a comptoir for compting. Or let me look at an actual token and see whether that's an R or a small t. A comptoir or a comptoir. Fishing. But that's a colony, that's San Diego. Let's go. Okay, maybe not fish through Spain, because Spain has 1,000,000 colonies. Or trade post. There we go. Portugal bin. You have Malacca immediately visible. That's a T. Comptoir. Comptoir. Business HUD. Yeah, computer. Yeah, again, that's another just on the list for needs an art. And another opportunity for cultural architectures. The players who have to change hats, they are still ordinary players. What you do over the campaign is you accumulate points. There's a victory point system. And your goal is to have the largest number. So they carry over all the points they earned from running their previous country. That's still part of their score. They just then get to abandon their old empire that is going to decline and be less relevant of a major player in later years, and instead try out the new business. But there's also elements of the mechanics that are set up to encourage the player to continue to, in their first country, be interested in what their second country will get up to eventually, and when they're in their second country, still kind of residually care about their old holdings. A little bit. It's vague. And again, I have read in abstract what all of these rules are. I have not witnessed how they play out in practice. Hypothetically, they encourage or discourage player behaviors. There's an English fleet. There's... Alright, yeah, there's a couple of trade convoys that exist. Travel around the map and dispense cash, or can be intercepted by pirates. So these, again, are just a counter and a size marker. So get like a larger, cleaner silhouette of boat. And yeah, there you go. It's the Gold Fleet. And the Oriental, the East Indies convoy. Fair enough. Actually, like, yeah, the Smyrna convoy. What does that do? Because that's related to, so there's a couple of trade centers that move around, and one of those, the Grand Orient Trade Center, ends up in Smyrna, representing the overland trade routes from east to west. Like, additionally, tell me, where else is Smyrna? Or is this token for the Grand Orient Trade Center, and they just preemptively label it Smyrna out of acknowledgement of, yes, that is your fate? Ah, okay, so it's interrelated to that. once Smyrna has the Grand Orient Trade Center, it spawns this convoy every turn. And if the Turkish player can successfully deliver the convoy to another Mediterranean port, they receive cash. If it fails to reach port, they instead lose cash and lose stability to crime. And furthermore, by deciding where they send this convoy, the recipient can also get cash. So this is kind of a bargaining chip that the Turkish player has. Try and make deals with other people. Just, hey, you want this business? You want this silk? You want these spices? Just help fight pirates. Pirates are bad for both of us. Unless they're your pirates stealing this convoy. So it's a diplomatic and military and economic tool that is there. There's also a Mediterranean trade center that exists, and if the Turks decide to send this convoy to anyone but the current owner of the Mediterranean Trade Center, they get a CB over trade disputes. So, once again, this is a POG with a plus or minus, so that's... well, like, all of the convoys, it's the same icon, except slightly different, actually, on Gold Fleet versus these two. It's the same icon, but positioned differently each time. Yeah, those would all just want a common rework of picture of silhouettes of boats. Yeah, that's this, but clean. Just remaster it. And now we're getting over into French iterations of main stuff. There's French army, so forth. So previous to Habsburg army for Austrians. It's very often the case that anyone that has these more visually busy flags and icons, they get absolutely mutilated by the printing that was done in the past 25 years ago, the technology to digitize a lot of these cleanly and reprint them over and over again. There's a lot of maker's marks, effectively, in the board game that you can tell came from the technologies of the time. There's a lot of this very early image editing program stuff that's in there. You can see the MS Paint and the maybe scanners that existed at the time. Or Habsburg military detachment. This hit musketeer got in a little bit better than the English one. There's a bit more contrast versus the orange backing here. The edges of the gun, and there's a little plume there as it is firing off. We'll probably find whichever of these got through the cleanest to serve as a baseline to hand off to whatever art friend I will consult about drawing a nicer musketeer. Though again, also, all these different countries are opportunities for many different musketeering outfits. There's the inflation icon. Okay, so like all the economic tokens that exist, they just have... they're mostly progress markers to sit on the various tracks on the board, and then have reminders of data in their corners. Inflation rate. The King of England. Here's the King of England. For whatever times he may so choose to take the board. several of these that are just crown word for king. For some reason, lowercase k, King of England, on this? Small king. Little king. It's a capital crown, lowercase king. Semi-king of England. Not the king, just a king. It could be any king. A king in England is not necessarily king of England. Alright, so the lowercase, I guess, is considered. So here's the what? Kaiser. Stadtholder. Tsar of Russia with 2 S's, a Y, and an I with 2 dots. Russia. Really, I wonder why lowercase on the titles. Is that a grammar thing? Or... like, you'd think you'd capitalize Tsar and Kaiser, and they're important. Their ranks, their positions, it's the Tsar of all the Rossias. Right. Sultan, also lowercase, so it's at least consistent across all of them. I'd capitalize these, putting them on token. It's the Sultan of Sultans of Turkey with an I-Y-E. Just put all the vowels. Just pick whatever you'd like. We're not going to tell you which vowel goes at the end of Turkey. Just try them all. Among the Ottomans, there are many vowels. And the Doge, Venice. And so, yeah, so there's one of those for each country, and it's the same crown on all of them as originally printed, so again, this would be an opportunity to have many hats, as these countries had different hats, and fancy hats at that. So we could have different hats instead of same hat. Have a nice Doge hat. Sultan hat. Ray, Tsar, other Ray, office holder hat. It was a time of many hats. Yep, that's further opportunity for enhancement to the artwork. But again, the tokens as they are stand. This just is here to be... the chief is on the field. No data needs to be stored there, since you like roll the data when you spawn your leader as a general. Beep. Beep. Case by case basis, so there's no numbers to rearrange on this. Stadtholder. Stadtholder. General purpose, land technology token. Tokens for individual technologies as they sit on the tracker. So there's only the slight bit of data on this, just the turn that is the earliest they unlock. Turn/year represented by turn that they unlock and become available. So data-wise, these are very simple. They just need to preserve that number. Then otherwise, there's an opportunity to, one, make the name of the technology actually fit on the square. It's weird that technology itself is up here in lowercase. I suppose that is again a French grammar thing. The individual tech tokens do serve a purpose here. is part of how it works. So they're like at a position on the tech track at the start, and then after they unlock, they start drifting down the technology tree until they slam into whoever's at the front of the tech race. And then they slide along the track and serve to differentiate who is ahead of or behind the curve at the moment. So like this Renaissance tech counter is still, it serves a purpose of indicating whoever's to the left of this token does not yet have Renaissance tech, whoever's to the right does. And depending on how the arms race is going, there could be many people on different sides of this line. Eventually they all accumulate at the bottom and become unimportant. Yeah, nobody has link permissions at the moment still. Unless I go ahead and do things. As can happen from time to time. Again, I have, at this point, not started building a list of regulars. At some point I will, as there are many regulars of many numbers, and you're all appreciated around here. For the moment, remaining case by case. Ah, good. Yes, that's Solomon's hat. Yeah, that's, I think I have that image also sitting around, that powerful onion turban. See, I might have that just in my image folder. Maybe? If not, well, that's certainly the opportunity to add it to the pile. Emperor Solomon. That magnificent soul. Get that thrown in there. Quite large image, and for good reason. Man, that hat was a time of many strong hats. Good stuff. Put that away. Mighty onion hat. Those and more hats could end up on the, yeah, fine onion bits. Could end up on the leader tokens, since, you know, it's a good hat. Powerful people with powerful hats. Tech token just has its basic data, and then make the names, you know, probably fit on a line and use the freed up surface space to maybe sort out some kind of icon, either for tech in general, just to make the token more visually striking, or for the specific techs where it makes sense. Which would be a little difficult since the tech levels for land certainly kind of represent a bit abstract, vague general progressions of land fighting tech. They're mostly named after the eras in which the technologies existed rather than the specific devices. Like, there's arquebus here, and there is musket. These are at least referring to specific weapons. And before that you have the Renaissance in general, and then after that you have the Baroque War. Here's Baroque fighting technology for Baroque times. You Baroque fight now, in the Baroque. Fight Baroquely, with Baroque weapons and Baroque armor, on Baroque horses. It's time for the Baroque. Barbecue War, it's here. Or War of Maneuver. That's a strategy that became more feasible and talked about increasingly in the later times. And just here's your war of maneuver technology. Your moving wars. We used to fight wars in place. Now instead, travel while war? War on the go. Mobile war. And then the War of Lace. Beyond even just talking about a period or an approach to things, this is a specific war from later in the timeline of it's here now. Alright, let me go ahead and confirm what that is. That does not mean teeth. Means something else than it is again. Name of a specific war. Yes, the Lace Wars. The Pretty Wars. Which I'm now trying to find. Yeah, it's a very broad term. It's not even any specific wars. It's just the Dainty Wars. It's a general idea. Actually hard to hear it used. It's hard to search for it being used to refer to the actual events, and not instead about people now speaking of them retroactively, or stuff named after the idea, or 18th century reenactment groups called Lace Wars. It is the wars fought in the times of powdered wigs and poofy pants and what have you. The fancy, dainty, increasingly puffed up Euro royalty fighting it out with each other. This technology for this later slang for an era of warfare. Yeah, apparently there's a common movie from the 60s called The Lace Wars, The Frilly Wars. There's the generic, no particular color general token, where there's several placeholder rando generals as well. Sets for each empire, and then sets for general use by minors, and also a set of mercenary rando generals whose names are just like question mark number 3, and so forth. Who have stats arranged as normal, so that doesn't require further consideration. Just there will need to be a colorless template for these, and then have appropriate backing put onto any of them in particular. Gold mine icon, or perhaps bread, perhaps cheese mine, vague lump mine icon, slab mine. Some manner of ingot. Gold mine, land mine. Mine what you feel like. It's here though. Token exists because there are places that can develop gold mines and then later like on the reverse side of those, there's a depleted mark for gold mine that has been expended and gone dead, and the dream is over. Things can cause gold mines to become inactive. So that's another, this needs a nicer icon on it. Just clean it up, just pretty it. Generic Admiral, generic Army, where I've blanked out the icon even on here, because for all of the miners, there is... Every miner country that has an army worth of soldiers to throw around does have a token with an emblem for them, and those would all need to be prettied up as well. I could go ahead and grab image that I have the scan of one of those sheets. You go into my raw scans of the tokens. Which of these is the one with all the generic armies on it? Actually been the one I was branching around at the start. Looks like it would be this, if I just throw that in there. That's from earlier, where there's rebels. And way down over here, so there's also the trade centers mentioned earlier, but now you can see over in this corner in a wide variety of colors, armies for Crimea, for Prussia, for Poland, for Hungary, for Pfalz and Hesse, Sweden, Latvia, Denmark, Morocco, Persia, Algeria, Royalist faction of the English Civil War, Protestants in general. I think those are for internal struggle in France, maybe? Or those might also participate in the English Civil War. Generic indigenous peoples of an area, or some native fighting, and also the fleets. Various other groups also still use the same boat icon. Purposes. Yeah, it's more emblems that need to be beautified. Yep. Yes, some emblems are very visually busy. Others are pretty stark and straightforward, like the Scottish cross there. Managed to make its way in. Largely intact. Got some texturing on the background color from the quality of the scan. Put that away. But yeah, so each of those as well will need itself a nicer version of their national emblem. Fit in nice and square and clean. Many flags to redraw. Yeah, there's a colony marker. Getting into further iterations on those, which means we're getting close to the end of the tokens overall. There's more pirates. Trade posts. Very wiggly symbol of the Netherlands. Any remotely fancy coat of arms got absolutely mutilated in being printed for this game, and then later scanned. The workflow was not kind to any of the iconography here. Dutch Fort, Dutch General, Dutch Musketeer, yep. All those things from before, but the Netherlands. Boat tech icons, where at least for each of these, for the most part, they're the name of a type of boat. You could have picture of that kind of boat on the boat tech. And hopefully with a little bit of sculpting, it would also result in a clear sense of progression and escalation from one boat to the next. Your galleons, your Latin sails in this case, as the important technological advancement. Gun batteries. Alright, so yeah, enough of these are named distinctive things that you could also have fairly visually striking, different looking tech markers. Of like, yeah, boat silhouette, elaborate, big, many sails rigging, gun on boat, a lot of gun on a boat. Vessels in Genesis, just another more big ship profile, 3-point sails, pillaging. Alright, so we've gotten out of the boat tech. That is the highest that the boat tech gets over here on turn 49. Very blended in down there, to where very crunched in there. You can almost still see some definition of the numbers. In the year 17... The 17... I think that's 30? That's probably 30. Turn 49. So then we also have a bunch of contextual markers for warfare information. Yeah, pillaging. I'm not sure what, if anything, is supposed to be drawn here. Just sort of a splotch. We try to find a pillage marker. There's a fair number of them for conducting warfare, so I might be able to drag one out and get a better sense of what it does. Or rather, what it looks like. What image is meant to represent? Okay, it's about as washed out on the pillage token as it is there in the scan. It's maybe like a little landmass that's on fire. Maybe like is there a sunrise here? And like, is this a coast that's been torn up? It's very orange, whatever it is. Is this like a cloud of smoke rising from a burning town or something? Maybe. It's the mysteries here. Draw a picture of pillaging. It might be a house or fort on fire. Like maybe this is a wall that has a chunk missing out of it. It is pillage, and yeah, it's space for a plus or minus there, and how pillaged is this place? Like, lightly pillaged or really, really extensively pillaged? To do pillage art, there's your general purpose, background pirates, actual freelancing crime pirates affiliated with no one. Portugal's set of all the general purpose stuff. Price of spice, where all the trade goods have one of these, and that data is for the rules for what causes the price to drift one direction or the other. Or this, yeah, this is the token for how much spice is being made throughout the world. It was on a tracker somewhere, and it just has to be there for spice. Maybe add a picture of each trade good to the relevant tokens to, again, make it a bit less flat. Like here, it's spice. There's the spice. Spice here. That flavor dust. It. the spice, as represented by this square. And like with the rest of the trade goods, cotton, fish, fur, porcelain. Spice a second time. Why do I have two of spice? Is one of them mislabeled? Yeah, price of spice, production. Okay. I have one of them. I have production of spice mislabeled as price of spice. And then production of spice labeled as production of spice. So I don't have the price of spice token in here. We re-extracted sugar, tobacco. Alright, so yeah, those exist. Their data is preserved. Could benefit from some icons. Rebel Army. It's an army token, labeled as Revolters, and just has a red flag on it. For Rebellion. It could stand to be a larger flag. It's kind of tiny, as it stands, as printed originally, for the icon. But as like the general choice, yeah, just the red and black, that's been a pretty consistent general purpose rebel color scheme throughout the franchise, so that all serves fine. Also for like the gradient on the background nicely distinguishes it from the other tokens. This stands out quite nicely. Especially since the physical tokens themselves are also like a little bit glossy, and that helps like highlight this. The Rebel Army tokens, they stand out nicely. So that is fine, just do the same, but redrawn, fresh. Needs a louder rebel flag, maybe a little silhouette of a rowdy fellow holding the flag, maybe a mob under the flag. And again, so like, yeah, it's the same musketeer icon as on all the other rebel detachments. A number goes here to distinguish the various counters from each other for record-keeping purposes when you have a bunch of them on the board, and write down, you know, how many soldiers are in each of them. Just needs to be space for a number on these counters. But otherwise, yeah, there's, again, just a gradient of that red and black to highlight that this is Rebels. Rogue Musketeer. There's no distinction between like flavors of Rebels and their goals, at least as far as the units are concerned. There's various sources that will cause rebellion, and if there's anything particular about a rebellion's mechanics, it'll be part of like the rule text for the event that causes the rebellion. There's not organic general purpose systems for rebel types. For the most part, they're kind of all the kinds of rebel that can exist are bundled together into one. They're context sensitive. Rebels in non-core territory will try to like return their lands to their rightful homes and so forth. Rebels caused by religious differences will cause more stability hits and what have you, or be more likely to occur because that religious friction happens. Here's one of the generic generals, like a step beyond the generics, the generics who don't even have an icon. This is just... These are a mechanics placeholder for if no general is present, you flip a random one of these onto the board to represent whatever rando leadership is there. And they're all pretty terrible, but that's the point. They're the placeholder. They're the fallback numbers for if you need a number, but there is nobody around. So there's several of these. They're all Z grade. If any leadership exists at all, it overrides the need for a replacement. There's the icon for the rebellion itself as an idea, rather than any of the units it's moving around. So you have... Is that a torn-up banner or a scythe? I think it's a tattered flag. It's a bit too irregular to be a farm tool, but a farm tool would also make sense here. Get your torch and pitchfork out for rebellion as a concept, where also so they have large or small rebellion, where it's also part of the mechanics that rebellions left unattended will ramp up in intensity and then propagate out into adjacent territory. Yeah, you can get, again, the color scheme remains good for, it immediately draws your eyes onto this and highlights that, yep, here's bad news, here's blood mode kicking in. These are not good times for your empire, these are bad times. These are the revolts. Yep, arriving at Russia's set of general tokens, which are brown? It's a color choice, I suppose. There's St. Petersburg, specifically St. Petersburg. Russia gets an opportunity to invest in the city and make it a big deal and just get this permanent size 4 fortified harbor at St. Petersburg. St. Petersburg, but half the S is missing. That's as it is printed. That's like, the texture here. That's the edge of the token right there, as it was when it sat in the sheet before being popped out. Some of this text is not terribly well aligned on the original pogs. This is a siege progress marker, as represented by a couple of squiggly lines. Just for, in general, when you manage to successfully put a bit of pressure on a fort, where essentially sieges in the board game, the siege mechanics have been preserved entirely throughout the Europa franchise. Sieges in Europa 4 work exactly the same, essentially, as they did in the board game. You park an army outside a fort. If it's big enough, they get to roll a die every round to try to siege harder. And they'll accumulate tokens like this one that make their future siege rolls work better, and then eventually knock over the fortress. Eventually. This smudge says siege. It is very difficult to tell from the choices. The line is a bit more crisp on the physical token. But again, color choices that are close enough that the scanner complained, said no, just disagreed that what, no, these are the same. All siege is the same. And now we're into Spaniards, indicated by their kind of muted off yellow. Like, yeah, the color choices are... The color choices for the empires are weird for every one of them that where the players change up. The big four that stay on the board the whole time, you have red for England, blue for France, gold for Spain, green for the Ottomans, and, you know, that's nice and distinctive versus each other. It's them all highlighted. And then elsewhere, so it's like orange for the Dutch, which, okay, that makes sense. And so they also put orange on Venice, but a slightly different orange. Except, wait, no, actually. They put orange on Venice, then brown on the Netherlands, and then a lighter brown for Habsburgs. And a hybrid brown-orange, the in-between. But then, meanwhile, both Portugal and Russia are also given shades of brown? They picked 4 colors for the 4 players that are there the whole time, and then ran out of ideas, and so everyone else is different earth tones. Ah, there's one of the Trade Center icons with the name blurred out, so that could be any of the major commerce zones. Yeah, like here, now we've arrived at Turkish stuff. It's green. Brighter green on some, more muddled green on others, but they're all green. Just green. Green for Ottomans. There's a Pasha, where they have room for data. Time to change the tape. Over to Victoria's soundtrack. Here we go. For the ongoing industrial effort of processing tokens into different tokens. Yes, so this fine portrait of a turbaned fellow. That, I can scale this thumbnail down, park it on the side, and I will set up a canvas for sketching layout again. Alright, let's see. I was able to make this transfer over smoothly the first time. Let me see if I can recreate my steps here. Gotta jump through a couple of hoops. Alright, now I've gone and put that in the wrong one. Never mind, forget the thumbnail, we do it live. That's fine. Drop this down. There we go. Well, this lives here now, and we will work with it. Let's go ahead and drag in... What is the file name on what we're working with here? Labeled it first Turkish, and then Pasha. There we go. There's a fine lad. Sized. Yeah, there we are. Alright, so we have here, this is a particular little sub-mechanic that exists for the Ottomans, where they have these tokens representing powerful noble families within the empire that are both a general and an attached army built into it. Have name up there. where I've actually, let's see, for my sample I've drawn out a pretty mediocre one among the available great houses. Appropriately by the name of Mehmet. So let's just trail off there. So you got a name there. At the bottom you have your core, land, general stats. Down here, in this case, our good fellow of the House of Adequacy is a 101 in he maneuver shock and fire, or maneuver fire shock. Considered a rank I, the overall priority scale. Fortunately, very low priority. Having an actual general around could override these stats pretty effectively. So then over here, as a number 1, you have in this position, there's like an assumed force composition that they carry around, and that's how many points of soldiers he has attached to him innately. For each point of this, it's like 2 cavalry, 8 infantry, or something. But there's some standard composition that all of these units use. Go looking in the old rulebook. Various feudal troops. Military leader. Force value in increments of 10 strength points. Ah, they're half and half. 5 infantry, 5 cavalry. Always considered of conscript morale. Yeah, this one point here is 5 dudes and 5 horses. Points thereof. So even under that terrible leadership, that's still a pretty okay... That's a number. That's some soldiers tucked away in there. They can do a fight. And then over here is the other half of the mechanic, which in the case of our good House of Mediocrity is at a 0 regardless. Where over in this position, every Pasha has a corruption rating, that is how much of your money they are wasting by existing. And so in the case of this fellow, he doesn't cost anything. He is there and adequate and deals with his own budgetary needs as necessary. But for others, they could be good and cost money to be worth being good, or they could be awful and despite that still cost you many ducats per turn and require you to want to do something about them to get them ruined. And so furthermore, the way this works is these are 2-sided counters, which presents the possibility that you could condense them down to one side as well, where the idea is that at the start of the game, all of these households have stats on them, and over time, various events will cause the houses to become more decadent and more corrupt. So you flip them from their good side to their bad side, and their stats henceforth will be worse. And it is the case that you always need to have a certain number of these on the field. So at first they're an asset, and then over time they become a liability as more of your houses get ruined. Though in the case of the House of Mediocrity here, they're actually identical on both sides of the pog. Nothing changes, no one notices, nothing happens. Just regardless, 101 For 1 point of guys, no cost. You can always count on them. But yeah, so to save a facing of the token, you could have both sets of numbers side by side. Your good numbers and your bad numbers. Though for the sample one I pulled, they're identical all across. But you'd very easily have the two numbers coexisting over a marker. Yeah, gunking up a little. But yeah, you could have some manner of sign. And then the two numbers side by side for ease of consultation. I'm pretty sure there's no houses that improve on their flip side. Actually, go ahead and drag up the spreadsheet. Take a look at it. A grand unified Europa reference. Has an entire tab for passions. And let's see, looking these over. There's some that hold steady across the corruption, for the most part. Hold steady or only get slightly worse. But in general, it is a decay. I actually put together the averages of all of them in regular mode and corrupt mode just to see the overall difference that gets made. And let's see. In regular mode, on average, these cost just a ducat per turn per token, whereas in corrupt mode, 3. Average unit size is 1.3 in regular mode, 0.85 in corrupt mode. Some of them don't have an army at all when they're in corrupt mode. They just forget to bring troops. Just General Salim shows up as he's supposed to and takes command of whatever's in his vicinity. And we can't tell him no, he has tenure. And let's see, average general stats actually stay the same across the board overall. 1.8 maneuver, 1.1 fire, 1.3 shock. That average stays the same, but the numbers rearrange themselves across the generals. So in order for that to happen, there might be some who get slightly better at something. But for the most part, it's same or worse. So yeah, just mostly however we arrange the general token, actually less so. Space gets freed up because all of the Pashas are Europe only, and they're all land leaders. None of them are boat leaders. You don't need the regional qualifiers on these things. And none of them have siege skill. None of them know how to break a fort, so this whole corner is freed up. So if you were still looking to do it two-sided, you could also have the regular stat layout and then have this vacant corner be, and it occurs to me that I did all the sketching directly on the sample pog rather than on its own layer. Go ahead and wheel that back. Actually add that layer. Lock down that underlying image. Just quickly sketch that up. So yeah, that is a further thought. Since looking at the pogs as they are, the only way to tell the corrupt side from the regular side is knowing that the corrupt side is the worse one. They didn't put any indicator of which is which otherwise on the pogs as printed. You just have to understand that they start in good mode and go to bad mode and check and compare the numbers and see which is worse. Or in the case of House Meh, not be able to tell the difference between corruption and legality. There is in fact no difference between the corrupt and the law-abiding. You imbecile. So either have the two sets of numbers side by side on one facing, or have one numbers and then actually use this corner to have some manner of symbol of okay or not doing so great for good mode or sloth mode, some sort of hedonism icon. And then, of course, get some manner of more cleaned up image for you know, portrait of Turban Man, of well-to-do fellow, which actually, this might... that seems to be the onion hat. Let me get... the picture of the Emperor out again and lay those side by side. Is this an intensely blurred image of Solomon? That might be this very portrait, very heavily artifacted down, or at least redrawn from that portrait, maybe squeezed a bit laterally. Is this same hat? It's very close to same hat. Or maybe a different iteration on, like, a different portrait of the same emperor. Or someone doing tribute to this portrait. Because you can tell, like, the proportions are more elongated upwards, but it is similar relative largeness of face V-turban. He's also wearing, you know, lighter red shirt, but with a darker vest around it. And a lot of the face has vanished into the detail here, so it's hard to tell if that's supposed to just be a shadow or a full beard. Like, there's no visible nose on this one. Very hard to tell what any of the face detail is meant to be. But that is perhaps near same hat. Similar hat. I suppose also I didn't resize this quite fully, strictly. Let me get a better look there at the sub-region. Okay. Gently, whoa, hey. Slightly fiddly tools to work with here. Right, that's a little closer. Still not quite everything that I'm actually calculating. Here, there's... Extend that. Or wait, have I not reset? There we go. There's the whole thing. There's full meh. That seems like a reasonable approach to what to do with the token. This, yeah, the Pasha is otherwise well proportioned as a counter. Identifying image surrounded by data. Just look to do a bit more to section out the space visually. Like, for the general tokens as well, probably help to, in general, have... Putting some kind of symbol under the number helps, like, visually reserve the space and section out which numbers are which. Whereas with all these tokens, as they are in their original printing, it's just numbers, it's just text on the flat background. They don't have anything to consistently remind of what each of these numbers are. That really hits its peak with the diplomacy token. But yeah, having like a symbol for rank and symbols for the combat stats and so forth go under these areas. That'll help compartmentalize and section out the object. I'm gonna go ahead and recreate my capture of the thumbnail that I had there. Come on, OBS. Don't be weird about it. Grab the thing. You know what things are. You know what? There you go. There's a handsome line. So with that, just continue tabbing forward. Yeah, pirate. Go ahead and embiggen this again. Yeah, there we go. Now we're getting into the Venetian stuff. Powerful business lion. Griffins for commerce. Code for general. Attachment. Yep, all the standards here. And alright, that's us finishing the route as we get to blank copy of card deck template for tabletop simulator. Is in each of these numbered cells you put image you want to be on the face of a card. Then you take the finished image and feed that as an item to the table sim, and it will make a deck of cards of these up to 69 objects per deck. And that's all the kinds of token that are present in the game. And a cursory review of what will need to be done in order to render each of them more functional and a little cleaned up and beautified. The to-do list to make new counter of many form. A part of the effort that will involve a fair amount of just prodding known associates who do the arts. That would be interesting. Yeah, there we go. So yeah, to arrive back at this one at the start. There's one that was more populated. Oh yeah, that's the card deck template, and I've loaded all of these counters into it to make just a primitive placeholder deck of counters to go into Tabletop Simulator. It's not the right medium to put this into. It doesn't... This sort of board game doesn't benefit strongly from being put into a physics engine for its physical objects. Table Simulator is for your more lightweight, sociable, reasonable span of time, fun, regular people board games, not for the deep magics. Just go ahead and save that sketch there, where on review only the Pasha, the general military leader, and the diplomacy token really needed strong thoughts about layout. Those are the ones that contain a bunch of data that wants to be organized and perhaps reorganized into smaller space. Most of the rest of them are pretty straightforward, just thing is thing per name. Is thing big thing? Small thing? Is thing. It'll just be a matter of, yep, is mostly a graphic, and then is a label, is a space for big or small. And then, as a lot of these are reused, outside of the situations where, you know, maybe as an ambition have many costumes and many hats, most of the legwork for token art is going to be getting appropriate flags in presentable formats at a good token face size. For the canvases I've been working on, I think I mentioned earlier, those are, for now, 256 by 256. It could become larger, it could become smaller. Depending. You can fit a lot into that many pixels. Yeah, getting flags, getting costumes, getting hats drawn out, getting maybe samples of architecture. That is plenty of space for art, and art is something I would mostly farm out to people I already know are good at it. Friends who might be interested in joining the efforts for the project. And if not that, perhaps go looking about for stock art, for photos, for tapestries, for paintings. Other strong source imagery that could be used to populate these. And then, even with all of that, probably the... Well, I at no point really didn't expect that most of the effort is redrawing the map. The board portion of the board game, it's the foundation, where most of the structure lives, on the board of the game. There will be much more time spent lazing about, redrawing lines, and planning textures, and rearranging that data, those numbers, those world numbers. To be handled in the future. Made possible by numbers, by those over there, those numbers. Those and other numbers via the eye. A world of numbers. A universe of numbers. Such efforts will continue over time until, eventually, some manner of presentable hobby product is cobbled together. There will be no more of the same hat. Every king will get their own hat. No two hats are alike. Generic, or I don't think this is quite a generic pirate. There's a couple of miners that have pirate fleets. This is one of those, I think. Yeah, for having any color on it at all, rather than just the full, flat black pirate token. These are someone's pirates. To do. Whose pirates are these? Find these pirates a good home.